Good afternoon, everyone. And good afternoon from our side as well. Paul and I are actually in the same room. It's just that you see us on different screens because we use our own computers, but we're here. So.
We're here.
Thank you, Adina. Thank you, Paul. I suggest to wait for another minute before we start. Well, we already have 68 people attending, so I suggest we will start now. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on ground handling regulation. My name is Mélissa Capizzi. I'm the Operational Affairs Manager within the EBAA, and I have the pleasure to moderate this exciting session today. And I have to say, we have 130 registered people joining us today. So it's quite impressive. And again, thank you for being here with us today. Stick with us. I promise it won't be boring. I am joined because I'm joined today by three amazing speakers who will share their perspectives throughout their presentation. We have Adina, Szonyi, and Paul Tibbe, ground handling experts at EASA. Well, let's say they are the compliance wizards of the group. They manage to make even the trickiest regulatory details sound clear and almost easy to comply with. And we also have Terry Yeomans, EBAA Program Director for IBAC and our resident guru on ground handling. He deals with regulation like no one else can. So they will all contribute at different points during the session. So please drop any question in the Q&A box, and we will go through the questions at the end of the session. And I guess that with 130 attendees, I'm expecting some great questions. So now, Adina, Paul, please show us how to solve this ground handling puzzle once and for all.
Thank you very much, Mélissa. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much also, Terry, for hosting us at the webinar. I think this is a great initiative. And it's an easy way to reach out to as many stakeholders and as many people interested in the regulations as possible. So we're happy to be here. Thank you again for the invitation. We have prepared a presentation for you. The presentation, we will go, both Paul and I will go through the presentation together so that we don't sound very boring and you don't hear only one voice instead of both of us. And I would start by sharing the presentation, which will reach out to you after the webinar, so you will have it as well. Hold on a second. I hope you're all seeing the first page. Okay, so the introduction's being done.
Thank you, Adina.
Paul, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. So Mélissa already is a good afternoon, of course, to all of you. And as Mélissa already said, that puzzle, ground handling regulation is still the missing piece in the aviation safety puzzle, as it says. That's what EASA stated also lately. And that's why they made some regulation for ground handling service providers. And I hope we can enlighten some issues on that and some important things. I'm sure it won't cover everything, but we do our best. This is the agenda for today. How to start implementing the regulation. That's something which is very important, of course. Then the declaration, that's something new. The use of industry standards and the proportionality of the rules and deviations for small organizations. What is a small organization? Because there are differences. It's not all the same. And then, of course, the contract activities. This is the first page. Maybe this is not the most interesting page, but it's still a slide, but still very important. As you can see on the top, the Commission implementing regulation. That's the part, the EU 2025/23. This is the regulation which is meant for authority, the competent authorities. The authority requirements of the ground handling regulation are in that regulation. And the competent authority, of course, do the oversight on that. That's for the operation is not the most important part. The next one underneath you see the Commission delegated regulation, EU 2025/20. Those are the requirements for the organization providing ground handling services. The regulation is split up in two parts. The Annex 1, management system, part ORGH, that's for the organization. The management system of the organization is there. And the other annex number 2, operational requirements. That's for the operational part of the ground handling regulation. Underneath, under Annex 1, there's some more SMS training, but we won't highlight that too much in this during this webinar.
May I interrupt you, Paul?
Yes.
Just a second. This is an admin question. I don't know how you see my screen, so please let me know if you see the screen the same way that I am seeing it, with the small videos of each of us, or are you able to see only the presentation screen? Because it's important for you to have the whole view of the slide.
Got the slide in the video at the top.
Okay, then let me quickly change it, because I can only show the slides without this being impeded by anything else that appears on my screen. So I will simply show the PowerPoint. I think.
Paul, can I ask you to turn on your own mic, because there is an echo. So if you could switch microphones, that would be.
Of course.
Thank you very much. And Adina need to switch off.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I hope this would be better now. It works. Yeah, can we continue, I think?
I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, that's no problem at all. Continuing, amendments to other aviation regulations. I will go through it shortly. There are amendments to other aviation regulations, for example, for aerodromes, information security management, that's a new thing. There's also some amendments. And one which is also really important, the amendment to the airworthy regulation, because before this regulation is getting into force and to be applicable, all the oversight on the ground handling organizations, which mostly are subcontracted from an air operator, is being in the AirOps regulation. So they had to amend that AirOps operation regulation also a little bit. The timelines. This is the timelines from now. To create this regulation took several years, but at least from 27th of March this year, the regulation came into force. It means it's a valid regulation, it cannot be changed at all, which consists of the regulation I just mentioned. And on July the 7th, the EASA decisions were published, the AMC and GM, the acceptable means of compliance and guidance material. We'll come back to that later on during this webinar. There is a transition period between the date of getting into force and to be applicable. That's 3 years. That's the formal transition period within which all the organizations, but also the competent authorities, can be prepared to this regulation, for this regulation. And it is plus 3 years, so in March 28, it will be applicable. All organizations have to be compliant, and also the competent authorities, of course, have to be compliant with this regulation from that day on. And then 6 years later, the application part IS is valid then. So luckily, that will take some extra time. It will give us some room for that. Where do I start? I think that's good to know that we have a quick overview on that. We prepared a flowchart. It's a guideline to identify if you're in the scope and if you have to submit a declaration, yes or no. And the easiest way, but that was my opinion, is to do it in a flowchart. So you can see what steps you have to take to decide if you are in the scope and if you have to submit the declaration, yes or no. We can shortly show the flow chart.
So you don't have to squint now. I am going to open it in the internet, and at the same time I will show you where you can download it. You will also have a direct link here. So this will lead you to the web page of EASA from the first ground handling webinar. And if you scroll down, you will have here, you can download all the documents that we used. And this is the flowchart. And if you click on it, it will open it here.
Can you all see it?
You cannot see it because I'm only sharing the slides now, but I will also shift advanced sharing options. I will shift my screen for you to see it on the internet now. Okay. And this is going to be the EASA website.
Left top, I think.
In top left, this is, now I will share it on my screen because it doesn't appear here. Yeah, over here. Share. So.
Yeah, there it is.
Hold on, this is the other thing that is going to come after that, the aerodromes falling in the scope.
As Adina said, you will receive this presentation also with direct links on that.
So, yeah, so ground handling webinar 1 2025, and you will be able to go to the page that I was just mentioning. And here below, it's the flowchart. And now you can see
now
the
you can see
a little bit bigger.
Maybe we can zoom in a little. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a flowchart we created ourselves. It starts, of course, with it's only valid for the EU regulation 20, the ones for the organizations. The first step you will make is if you perform ground handling services at an operation at an EASA aerodrome. We will send the link also to check if you have an EASA aerodrome, if you are working on an EASA aerodrome. If you are, then you have to make it to choose if you are a ground handling service provider or an aerodrome or an aircraft operator. Some information about that, it's in Article 3.1 of that regulation. And you can find more information about that. So if you're an aircraft operator, for example, it's yes, one or more ground handling activities. You have to choose between, or you can choose between 5 different activities. Of course, you can do multiple activities. Check in that regulation, Article 2.2, what the provisions are for that. Of course, if not, there's also a possibility for an exemption. It's in Article 2.3. We will not show you here, but you can read if you have the regulation with you. You can check that. There's an exception possible. If yes, you don't have to declare. If not, then you have to submit a declaration. Those are the first steps. And the rest we will explain a little bit later. We have the PBOB in EASA member state. We will explain that a little bit later.
So I can come back to the presentation.
Yes, you can.
Yes. Okay.
So while you're switching over, Adina and Paul, a question come up about easy access rules. When are the easy access rules going to be available?
The self-handling aircraft operators. One of the activities or organizations is one, if you are an aircraft operator yourself. Self-handling of aircraft operations. Aircraft operators in the scope, self-handling only commercial air transport, CAT operators of complex motor-powered aeroplanes.
It's important for you to remember this because these are the only operators that are falling directly in the scope of the ground handling regulation number 20 when they perform self-handling. Okay, so only CAT operators, commercial air transport operators, when they use complex motor-powered airplanes. Everything else falls outside the scope of the ground handling regulation when we talk about self-handling aircraft operators. So if you are an aircraft operator performing non-commercial operations with complex or non-complex motor-powered aircraft, then you're not in the scope. Of course, it is not expected for, let's say, non-commercial operator operating Boeing 747, for example, and I'm giving really an obvious example in this case. It's not expected from such an operator to do the refueling itself. So that's why we said, if you are using a complex motor-powered aircraft, it is expected that you will be using also external ground handling service providers. You will not do the self-handling yourself. But in case you do, for example, you may have a pilot that is doing some baggage loading, for example, for 3 VIP passengers of that aircraft of a non-commercial flight, yes, then in this case, it is considered that even those operators do not have to follow, are not required to comply with the ground handling regulation and submit a declaration, because the safety risks of baggage loading should already be covered in the elements of training of the pilot training and the ground handling operational procedures that already are regulated in Regulation 965 for aircraft operators. So there's no need to duplicate some things only for the sake of duplicating them. Again, as I mentioned, only CAT operators using more complex motor-powered airplanes are in the scope of the ground handling regulation when it comes to self-handling.
Yeah, perfectly explained. Where do I start? As we saw already on the flow chart, you start with reading the rules. That's very important, and it's quite simple to start with. There's a link on this page where we could show maybe, but it will take some.
It will take me
Well,
again time
yeah.
until I move to the internet, but it's
You can do
very
it
clear.
yourself.
And you don't even need to remember this. For example, you can
No.
simply put in Google EASA or Commission regulation, but it recognizes both, even though EASA is not the regulator in itself. But if you put ground handling regulation 20 or 25/20, it will pop up the right place where you can go and download.
And the first thing you will see is this page.
Yeah.
It has all the four regulations I already mentioned, but for you it's important the EU 2025-20. That's for the organizations important. You can also find on this web page, on this website, you can find some AMC and GM, acceptable means of compliance and guidance material, but we will explain that a little bit later. After you have read the rules, it's important to start with a gap analysis. There is regulation. Most of the organizations have already a management system in place. If you have so, do a gap analysis. What's in the regulation and what do you also have now? Most of the organizations have industries are compliant with industry standards, and so they already have some manuals in management systems. So first do the gap analysis. Then the second step will be to check who is my competent authority. Competent authority is the authority in the member state where the ground handling service providers are located or acting, and you can find out who your national competent authority is by clicking that link on that one. It's very clear. It's very important to make contact with them. Agree with your competent authority when you when to submit, because there is a certain period. I told you already about the transition period between 25 and 28. That last year is 1 year before the ground handling regulation becomes applicable. There's a period for the existing ground handling service providers to submit the declaration. So from 27 already. But as I said, agree with your competent authority when to, and they will help you. And then the next step, get to work. Make it an open agenda item at your safety meetings. That's very important. Talk about it, but start already soon. Pick one up implementing rule each meeting, as it says, to discuss. That helps. But also aircraft operators and aerodromes assist your ground handling service provider partners. That's very important. Keep in contact with them also. And for example, committee meetings for aircraft operations and aerodromes will help also. Then we come to the declaration, something new. It's not, there's no approval or certification required from the authority. That's something which is decided when making the regulation. You only have to declare. I will go through this slide very quickly.
Yeah, and it's also important to mention that's for an easy association in your mind that the non-commercial operators are already familiar in Europe with this concept, because we have the same concept of a declaration for the non-commercial operators, operators of complex motor-powered aircraft in Europe. So it's the same concept. There's no approval needed. You can already start as a ground handling service provider that has to declare. After you declare, you can already start providing services or continue to provide services without any approval from the competent authority.
Yeah, that's something very important. Responsibility for compliance with the regulation lies first with the ground handling organization. That's important. Then with the competent authority through oversight. But the first line of responsibility is always the ground handling organization. You are declaring that you comply with the regulation, so that's your responsibility. Information about declaring ground handling organizations will be publicly available on the EASA website soon. Not yet, of course, but it will be on the website of the competent authority as well.
Yeah, and that's an important question. Actually, we were asked before we even published the regulation, we were asked several times by many stakeholders if there will be sufficient visibility over which ground handling service providers have declared their services and the provision of their services in Europe. So we thought about why don't we make lives easier for everybody and include in the declaration form for the ground handling service provider a field in which they allow the competent authority to publish their contact details and their name, of course, of the organization for or aircraft operators to have clear visibility of which are the declared organizations in the European Union member states. So if the ground handling organization agrees that either EASA or the competent authority or both may publish their contact details, and that's just the name of the organization and an email address and the name of the contact person, then that will be listed on the internet, so they will be available for everybody to check. That's quite important.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, subject your declaration anytime between 27th of March 27 and the year after that to benefit from the advice you get from the competent authorities. We will raise, the competent authorities will not raise any findings during this transition period. That's why it's a transition period. Feel free to do so. It's good to get in contact and make appointments with them and agree that you will submit at a certain time. Be aware there's an error in Article 5 of the declaration of the regulation. It will be corrected anytime soon, I hope.
Yes, the commission has already been announced. The core agenda is prepared, so we're just waiting for the publication of the core agenda.
So,
an interesting topic, isn't it? Who is my competent authority?
Really interesting, this one. Yeah. If you're the competent authorities, if you're providing ground handling services in only one EASA state, which some of you do, then it's pretty simple. It's the competent authority in one EASA state where the aerodrome operation is located. Then you only have to declare to submit your declaration to that competent authority. That submission will go through a digital platform which is being developed at this moment, and we're pretty sure it must be available from 27. It's just a one click. It's a whole the declaration form will be entered in that system, and that the relevant competent authority will see that it's being submitted.
Yeah. The situation starts to become a little more complex when we talk about a ground handling organization, a ground handling service provider that provides services in more than one member state. Because in this case, we start to talk about the principal place of business. This is a concept that does not affect the way in which you submit your declaration, because the declaration will still be submitted with one click. It will be uploaded in this digital hub, in the ground handling hub, we like to call it, and all the competent authorities will be immediately notified, because if you operate in more than one country, if you provide services as a ground handling organization in more than one country, then you have more than one competent authority. So while the declaration thing in itself is not affected by this, the way in which the oversight will be done, so the way in which the competent authorities will oversee you, will be different. And the reason why we introduced in the regulation, and the reason why the regulation now uses the concept of the principal place of business, is particularly to simplify the way in which the competent authorities will oversee you. Because in such a case, if the principal place of business of a ground handling organization is in one EASA member state, by EASA member state, we also include Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland. This means that you will have one competent authority which will verify the management system of the organization only once at the location where the organization's principal place of business is. And then the result of that audit or inspection of the management system will be shared with all the other competent authorities in the other countries where the services are provided. This meaning that the other competent authorities will not have to repeat over and over again the same verification of the management system in all the countries where the ground handling organization provides services, because they already have the reports and the results of the audit done by the competent authority at the location where the principal place of business is. This also enables the competent authorities in the other states where the services are provided to focus more on the operations themselves at that particular station that is being subject to oversight, which means more looking into how the practice is following what has been written on the paper. So theory matches practice. Yeah, so it's time for the competent authorities to look more into how the ramp activities are being done, and not have to multiply the same audit over and over again on the management system. So that's where the concept of the principal place of business starts to make sense for oversight simplification. And we also mentioned there the rule in red. This is the rule Org Gen 105, where this is explained. I'm sorry, I think I forgot to mention one element which is important. If the organization is not located in the European member states or in the EASA member states, I mean, its principal place of business, then the situation is slightly different, because this means that there is not one main competent authority. Let's say there's not the competent authority at the hub, at the principal place of business. And this also means that all the competent authorities have an equal role, the same role. Of course, we are working together with the competent authorities to find solutions to simplify this, also to apply the same principle as if an organization had its principal place of business in an EASA state. Meaning, if one of the competent authority has already performed the first audit, the first inspection of the management system, of course, the results of that report can be shared with the other authorities so that they don't have to repeat. So it's, in the end, it's who goes first, which of the authorities will go to do the first audit or inspection to that organization for the results of the management system oversight to be shared with the other authorities. So it can be worked out, because the regulation has been written in such a way as to enable this cooperative oversight, regardless of whether the principal place of business is in Europe or not. However, it is more visibly or easier if the location of the PPOB is already in an EASA member state, of course, because then things are clear and the responsibilities of each of the authority are much clearer, whether the authority is the hub, the main competent authority, or it's a station competent authority.
And for all of these slides, or these three elements, it's quite simple. You just have to submit one declaration, and there in the annex you will highlight on what stations. But it's only one action. The industry standards.
So the industry standards, I'm aware of the time we were
Oh, yeah.
thinking of maybe advancing a little faster over the slides that are not so relevant for you, because we also want to give you proper time to ask questions. So this is a novelty, let's say, in the ground handling domain, in the way in which we approach the industry standards. It was difficult to write the regulation because we knew already that ground handling is not a totally new domain. It's not a new activity, but we had to regulate something that had been existing for 100 years, ever since the first flight took off. And we also had to be aware that the regulations can be simplified if we took into account the existing industry standards, which the industry has been using for many years and to a large extent. So we found a good approach in which the ground handling regulation enables the continued use of the industry standards. This remains on a voluntary basis, of course, but it has been seen in the past decades that the existing industry standards have elevated the safety level of ground handling activities. So why deny something that works well, and why not include a path or a way in which they can continually be used? So we have an implementing rule, but we didn't put this in this slide because the implementing rule provides the generic framework, but we have several AMCs and more guidance material. The AMCs, the acceptable means of compliance, indicate the good criteria, that the criteria of a good industry standard that they have to meet in order to be evaluated by EASA and the competent authorities to see if they comply, if by applying those industry standards, the safety objectives of the implementing rules are met. So they enable the use of the industry standards, and with the use of the industry standards, an organization can prove that they comply with the implementing rules. The examples of the industry standards are listed in the guidance material GM1, linked to the rule ORGH Gen 125. And there is another AMC, that's AMC 1, which provides more details about what kind of content, examples of what an industry standard or best practices can cover. For example, there are industry standards that are covering the processes of an organization, or industry standards that cover products, for example, transport equipment, or are also industry standards that address the training or even the management system of an organization, or the SMS. The question is also a very important question linked to the industry standards, is how the organizations applying them will be overseen. If there is any added value of the industry standards when it comes to the competent authority verifying what an organization does. So we had a rule, now the regulation provides a rule that I briefly mentioned before about EASA and the competent authorities evaluating the content of those industry standards to see if the content addresses the implementing rules, maybe most of them, maybe 90%, maybe 50% of the rules. And then the use of the industry standards by an organization, you need to understand that this is complementary and it provides sufficient relevant information to the competent authority to assess the level of performance in safety of that organization. So if you use the industry standards, this is already an indicator for the competent authority that yes, you care about the safety of your services. You have been interested in improving the safety in your organization, and this information will be used in the future for the authorities to build a risk-based oversight. What a risk-based oversight is when the authority will focus more on how you perform in terms of safety than rather ticking boxes, yes, you comply with this rule or the other or the other. So all this information related to how you take care to safely perform, provide the services, will be later used in the oversight. At the same time, please be aware that this is not, so the way in which the competent authorities decide to rely on the industry standards and on the audits performed by the industry will be at the total discretion of the competent authority. So they can decide whether they want to rely more or less on the results of the industry audits. So this means that the industry will have to convince the competent authorities that they perform reliable audits, and the results of those audits already done on the ground handling organizations will also help the competent authorities to I won't say to reduce the scope of the oversight, because the scope remains the same, but perhaps to reduce the frequency of the oversight or of the inspections, or to focus more on elements where they are not so certain about what has been covered in the industry audits. Now, there's another aspect. Sometimes the results of these industry audits are not always put at the disposal of the competent authority. I know, and Terry has been very kind to inform us that with the EBAA, things are working very easily, and the reports should be made available upon request to the competent authority. This may not be the case every time. So be cautious. It's good that you are aware of this thing, because there's no way that everybody acts, in which everybody acts. So that there may be different ways in which organizations and industry audit organizations are ready or willing to share the reports with the competent authorities. I think that's what was important for you to understand how this how the industry standards are integrated in the current rules. And now a few things about alleviations, because that was one of the most crucial aspects when we developed the rules. How do we make sure that the rules are not gonna kill part of the industry, kill in the metaphorical sense, of course, to stifle, to put down everybody who is not a giant organization. So the rules had to be adjusted also to small organizations. And while we all agreed that the SMS is non-negotiable because it is a scalable system, it has to be adjusted to the complexity of an organization and to the level of the safety risk of an activity. So the SMS can be adjusted, but there are, and that's why we said there's no negotiable, there's no alleviation about applying the SMS requirements, but some alleviations can be created when it comes to the administrative processes. And there we found some rules in which we could provide alternative solutions to say, if you're a small organization, you don't have to do the whole thing. You can skip some steps, you can have a simpler process, you don't have to report that many things, and so and so. So what is a small ground handling organization? It is considered to be one that has up to 25 full-time equivalent as a generic number, as an average number. Also to cater for the fluctuations in the number of personnel used during the peak seasons. And some alleviations that we could think of, which are, some of them are at AMC level, while others are at implementing rule levels, related to the management of changes. So if you have, as a ground handling organization, you have a very complex system or process by which you manage significant changes. For smaller organizations, the process doesn't have to be complicated, and therefore we have thought of some alleviations for the management of changes. The same thing for the safety reporting system. There are some possibilities to not have to follow the whole complex system, but you have some simplified or even fewer steps to follow. For the management system, as I mentioned, the SMS is scalable, but there are some possibilities to alleviate the admin part when it comes to the compliance monitoring process, for example. And I think we also have an AMC or some AMCs that provide more details for smaller organizations with regard to how to implement a safety risk management. When it comes to the personnel, more functions can be accumulated in the same person. So here, if you're a small organization, you may decide that your safety manager is also a training manager, or the accountable manager can do any of these functions. The important thing is that the person is competent, and if there is any conflict of interest, that has to be solved in advance. As for the training program, we also have foreseen some alleviations, and these are also included in the AMC level. Here you have the numbers of those particular implementing rules. We're not going into more details now. So please feel free to go into the rules, into the AMCs as well, and look for those AMCs and GMs that are applicable to small organizations. You will see that it's very visible because either in the title of the AMC or GM or in the text, you will clearly see written for small ground handling organizations. We've been talking about AMCs and GMs. What is the difference? You know, the EASA decisions, this is what we call EASA decisions, may contain acceptable means of compliance, guidance material, or in other domains, for example, aerodromes and airworthiness, we also have CSs, which are certification specifications. What are these acceptable means of compliance? These are, it's important for you to know that this is not legally binding. An AMC is not legally binding as a commission regulation, as an implementing rule in a commission regulation. Organizations and competent authorities can come up with their alternative ways to show compliance with an implementing rule. And these alternative ways in the EASA world are called alternative means of compliance. So these acceptable means of compliance have been developed by the group of experts together with the EASA, and having in mind that they should, if implemented, they should be very close, or they should ensure compliance with the implementing rules. But again, they are not binding, okay? So if you find a better solution on how to show compliance with the implementing rules, you will have an alternative means of compliance, and the AMC does not become mandatory. Guidance material, on the other hand, is even at a lower level. They are supposed to provide examples, explanations, clarifications, either of the content of the rules, of the implementing rules, or sometimes the content of the acceptable means of compliance. So their binding level is even lower than an AMC. In the presentation, you will also have a link to the frequently asked question that is available on the EASA website, which provides these explanations, the differences between the AMC and GM. I think also the CSs are explained there, but you don't need the CS because we don't have CSs in the ground handling world.
Hey, Adina,
for
sorry,
the
just
contracted
before.
activities, we also have, and I'm aware that we still have 13 minutes. So the question is, would you
Adina,
like me to focus on, or shall we move to the questions?
Adina, can you hear me okay?
Terry, we cannot hear you.
Terry, I do hear you, so I guess it's on Adina's side.
It's all right. I thought you were ignoring me earlier, Adina. You just can't hear me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. We had
A volume problem.
We had a volume problem.
That's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a question that's just come up, which is, I think it's a really interesting one for our sector, is the 25 full-time equivalent staff. Is that per organization or per location? Because that's something where you're going to see a difference between us and the airline operations.
Yes, that's a good question. It's per organization.
Okay. So an organization that is a global organization cannot be classed as a small organization if it has more than 25 full-time employees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And one that came really early on question was easy access rules. When are you going to make those available? Because as we've heard, this is very, very complicated, bouncing around between different things. So just tell us what we need to do with easy access rules.
The easy access rules are in the making. We have just been consulted on the cover pages. So while I cannot give you an exact date, I think we will have them in the coming 2 months, let's say. So anyway, we will have them before the end of the year, definitely.
Thank you.
Terry, Mélissa, what would you propose? How would you propose that we move forward? There are 2 more slides in which we were planning to explain a little bit how the contracted activities work and how they are regulated. But I know that you also have, our audience may have interesting questions and maybe even more relevant than these 2 slides. So please let us know how you would prefer that we do.
I would suggest carrying on with the next 2 slides and see what comes out after that. Because if the audience doesn't have questions, I know I do.
Okay, good, thank you. So we continue. Paul, would you like to take over or shall I go on?
I could take it over. We can do it together anyway.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
it says contract activities over ground handling, or you got 2 kinds of contracted activities by a ground handling organization or by an aircraft operator. This contracted activities over the ground handling organization to a regulated service provider. The contracted service provider is responsible for the safety of its services and to comply with the regulation. If the contracted activities are to a non-regulated service provider, then the service provider is responsible for that. The contracted service provider is included in this SMS.
So what this means is, so let's move to the examples world, because this is probably the easiest way to understand this. If you are, let's say, a bit larger ground handling service provider that provides both passenger services, baggage services, and some of the aircraft of the ramp activities. For example, you do the turnaround coordination, but you also do de-icing and you also do baggage loading and unloading. But you decide to, I don't know, you of course, being a medium range ground handling service provider, the refueling operations you do not do, but you decide to rent, or let's say all the contract with the aircraft operator goes with you. So you sub-rent, let's say, you subcontract the services of the refueling operator, the refueling service provider. What happens in this case? The fueling service provider is a ground handling service provider in itself, according to this ground handling regulation. So this would be what we call here in this slide a regulated service provider. That refueling operator is responsible to comply with the ground handling regulation itself. So this actually reduces the responsibility of the other ground handling service provider, which contracts the refueling operator. Yeah, because the regulation directly applies to the refueling operator, which means that the ground handling service provider, the bigger one, does not have so many responsibilities to be, so it is not responsible to cover the safety risk management of the fueling operator, because the fueling operator already has to comply with the ground handling rules itself. When it comes to what happens in the case when we talk on the right-hand side of the slide, we talk about a non-regulated service. A ground handling service provider may contract out a range of activities that are not covered by any regulation existing today. For example, the ground handling service provider uses the training services of a training company. That training company itself is not regulated by the ground handling organization, because the training company is just a training company. It's not a ground handling service provider. What does this mean? This means that the ground handling service provider using the services of that training company is actually responsible to ensure that the content of the training program which they contract out, complies with the ground handling regulation. So everything under this provided service falls under the responsibility of the ground handling service provider in the first place. So this is the difference between regulated and non-regulated service provider. And now we talk about ground handling organizations. When it comes to, and now I'm moving to the next slide, when it comes to aircraft operators, the situation is the same, and nothing is new here for the aircraft operators out there in the audience. We have this rule is included in Regulation 965. It's the same principle. If the services are provided by an organization which is already regulated today under an aviation safety regulation, then the monitoring, the control of the contractor are not so big, not so strong, not so rigid, like in the case when the services are provided by an entity which is not regulated, does not fall under an aviation safety regulation. So this is actually the principle that applies now in both cases. When we talk about the services contracted by a ground handling organization to itself, or when we talk about the services contracted by an aircraft operator. So, of course, now with the new ground handling regulation, what's going to be easier is for the aircraft operators to also relax a little bit the compliance monitoring of their ground handling service providers. They can focus now more on the aspects that are in which they are more concerned. For example, compliance with the operating procedures specific to that aircraft operator, because all the other elements will now be verified by the competent authority of the ground handling organization. So this very strict and very rigid verification by the aircraft operator of their ground analysis providers will be relaxed in the future. And now the content of the AMC linked to that rule in Regulation 965 will also enable a more risk-based monitoring by the aircraft operators of their ground handling service providers. So what changes? Well, of course, things will change because there is now a new regulation, and there is a shift in perspective with which we will have to get adjusted, because now the ground handling organizations will be fully accountable and responsible for the safe provision of the ground handling services. They will have a mandatory management system and a mandatory SMS, which was not there before, unless under the obligation of a contract with the aircraft operator. The declaration regime is also something new that comes with the regulation, with the ground handling rules. And what's also new is the direct oversight by the competent authorities to the ground handling organizations. What does not change is the fact that the aircraft operators continue to remain responsible for the safety of the aircraft. And this responsibility will not shift. Also, what does not change is that the aircraft operator remains responsible for the safe provision of ground handling services when it comes to non-regulated, when it comes to outside third country ground handling services. So everything that does not happen in the EASA member states or at a regulated aerodrome under the basic regulation. Also, something that stays like today is that the ground handling organizations will have to continue to comply with to apply the instructions and procedures of the aircraft operators, and also will have to continue to apply the aerodrome procedures which are applicable to them as aerodrome users. So in a nutshell, what you need to do, start going into the ground handling regulations, see what's there. You will probably identify that many of the things that are written there you already comply with, but look at the details, because maybe sometimes you will discover elements in the rules that you have not think of before, or you would like to adjust. Do a gap analysis. What you have, your manuals with what's in the regulations. Compare them, compare your management system to what's in the rules. Contact your competent authority, talk to them. Any questions that you have, ask them the questions.
They are
try.
the first point of contact that we
Exactly.
have to highlight. They are the first point of contact, not EASA. Just contact your competent authority. Stay in touch with them.
Exactly. They will advise you, and it's a good opportunity to talk, even run a simulation, because you will not be punished, and the competent authorities will support you and will answer your questions. And don't forget to, when you talk to your competent authority, agree on a date or a time when you can submit your declaration in that last year between 2027 and 2028. The sooner you submit a declaration, the more time you will have to ask your authority, so how am I doing? Is it good? I have a question. How should I implement this? Because you are still be in the transition period and nothing will happen. The authority will not come to oversee you yet. So that is a room for maneuver for you to test the waters, to see if what you have already put in your documentation, how you do the operations, will be considered to be compliant. So talk to your competent authority. That's our strong advice. And we apologize, we have already reached the deadline for the webinar today. We will shut up now, but not before thanking you very much for listening to us, and we are ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Well, we can extend the webinar if people are still listening, then we can take some questions. So Terry, I suggest you take the questions in the box.
Yeah, okay, so thanks. So first question that came through was, when are the rules for the baggage handling going to be published? Now, I believe they already are. They're already in the IR. There's nothing else to change, is there, or to be added in the implementing regulations? So it's already there.
Correct, exactly. We refrain from regulated too much where we didn't have to address a safety concern or a safety objective. So that's why the rules on baggage handling are not so extensive. What we're mostly concerned with will be that the baggage, the pieces of baggage will be properly accepted, or which means introduced into the system in order not to affect the center of gravity and the mass and balance calculations. Also, the relevance of baggage handling is strongly linked to the handling of dangerous goods, and thirdly, to the way in which they are loaded and unloaded. So the most elements will be found in the other rules and AMC and GM, and that's why the content on the baggage handling is rather reduced.
Okay, thank you. Next one, what interval of oversight can we expect from the competent authority?
Yeah,
I guess is a difficult one for you to answer as EASA.
Yeah, well, yes, but while we still are in the transition period, we, I think, are the focal point on how to read the rules. After those 3 years, it will go to the competent authority. So I think we can answer that.
Yeah, it's not a big issue deal
for now.
Yeah, yeah. Because of its new regulation, and also the competent authorities have to get acquaintance with the regulation and what to do. The first oversight interval will be 5 years from the date of applicability, of course. So within this 5 years, all aspects of the regulation has to be checked to see if it's compliant. But it's only for the first 5 years. After that, the regular interval will be 4 years, 48 months. That's the standard. It can be amended if it can be shortened if the competent authority will agree that it's the level of compliance is okay, and there are some things about that. It's in the regulation. You can read it.
Yeah,
there.
so the idea is that if you prove to your competent authority that you are capable of managing your safety in a very effective way, then this may lead to an extension of the oversight cycle. So the competent authority will visit you in more than 4 years. But if you show that your level of maturity of your management system, of your safety management system, and how you manage your safety risks and mitigations is not so mature, most probably this cycle of 4 years will be reduced, and you will be visited by the competent authority more frequently. So it very much depends on how you are able to, or how, as a ground handling organization, you are able to demonstrate to your competent authority that you can manage the safety risks in an effective way.
And then the final question that's come through in the Q&A for now is, does the ground handling organization have to assess and audit a regulated service provider? I think you covered that in the slide, but that's also applicable to operators that are contracting ground handling services. Are they going to be expected to assess somebody who's already regulated?
That's a very good question, Terry. And
not my question.
But anyway, thank you for the question to the audience. This is a very important question. This is what's happening today, because today there are states in which there is no oversight of ground handling. There are some states in which there is some oversight. In any case, the aircraft operators perform audits to their ground handling service providers. And sometimes these audits are more than necessary, or too many, and they can be reduced in numbers. What is expected to happen in the future, but this will not happen overnight, only with the gaining of this trust of the aircraft operators in the competent authority oversight done to the ground handling organizations. So what will happen in the future, what is expected to happen, is that the aircraft operators will not have to verify again and again the ground handling service provider's management system, because this is already going to be the prerogative of the competent authority. The competent authority will do a full scope oversight, which will cover everything. The way in which the organization is managing its changes, the SMS, which is the crucial point of the safety performance and the way in which the safety of the service is provided. The competent authority will verify the training program and the records of the training done by the personnel of the ground handling organization. They will verify whether the organization is managing and is implementing the maintenance program for the ground support equipment which it uses. Everything will fall under the oversight scope of the authority, which means that the aircraft operator will be able to focus more, let's say, on aspects that are not in the first side of the competent authority, which is probably the specific operating procedures of the aircraft operator, because the competent authority will not verify one-on-one. And that's why probably the aircraft operator will continue to be interested to see, yes, you have to apply my own procedures. I am looking into that next time when I do my audit, but I will not look at your whole SMS because I will take into account the results of your competent authority. And here comes another question, which I imagine that might pop up in your minds. Will the aircraft operators be able to have access to the reports from the oversight? Because then they may say, yes, I have seen the report, I'm happy with it, I leave you alone because the authority has done its job. I no longer have to verify everything. And here is the answer. Nowhere in the European regulations on any aviation domain is the case where the competent authority shares the result of the oversight of an organization with somebody else. However, the report coming from the competent authority will belong to the ground handling organization. It's theirs. And nothing will prevent the ground handling organization from sharing this report from its competent authority with its clients, which are the aircraft operators. It's their decision. Also, the competent authority has no idea who the clients of the ground handling organization are. So it's up to the ground handling organization to decide, yes, I want to have fewer audits from you, the aircraft operator, therefore, here is the report from my competent authority. Everything has been verified.
Thank you, Adina. Mélissa.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, congratulations. We survived the ground handling regulation together and even enjoyed it from my side. So thank you all for your questions. Of course, a big thank you to Adina, Paul, and Terry for your support. And as it's all about sharing the good things in life, if you already know that you will miss the discussion and incredible speakers of this webinar, remember you can always replay the video on our EBAA YouTube channel. So thank you once again. I wish you a great afternoon and stay tuned for more EBAA webinars and events. Thank you very much.
Just one quick thing, Mélissa.
Yes.
I want to let everybody know that the work that Adina has done and the EASA team to get to where we are here has been amazing. This journey started in 2018 from EASA's point of view. There's an awful lot of work and an awful lot of people that have put in effort to get to where we are today. So thank you to Adina and the team at EASA. Paul is relatively new, so you don't get the appreciation straight away, but you'll get there as well. But thank you. It really has been a journey, and we have, as an industry, been involved in this from the start. So this is not new to us, and that's thanks to EBAA that we've been able to do that. So next thing is EASA webinar, 23rd of September. If you haven't already signed up, look at it and sign up for the next webinar on ground handling, more in depth.
Thank you so much. And Terry, the thanks would not be completed without our thanks going back to you, because you have been supporting us from the very beginning. And I think that the business industry, the business aviation industry, will have to thank you for ensuring that the rules are appropriate and proportionate, also for all the sizes and all the types of operators. So thank you too.
Thank you very much.
We hope to see you at the ground handling webinar on the 23rd, but we are also available anytime you need us. Happy to support.
And we will be able to share the slides on our EBAA website as well to answer one of the questions.
Perfect.
Yeah, we have to send you an update because we spotted the mistake, so you will receive it now. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.